All right. Let me make sure that I have everything I need so we can zoom through this. It's going to be another short and sweet stealth influence content mastery session. If you're live on Zoom, great. We'll jam afterwards. Again, short and sweet. This is probably a couple hours of video that I'm doing over 5 days. So I wouldn't expect it to be more than 20, 25 minutes. All right. So we're going to talk about a continuance of how to make content that builds a strong brand, connect with your audience, builds authority, and most importantly, sells stuff. Okay. This is where most marketers, most salespeople completely, for lack of a better term, shit the bed. They have one way they use curiosity and scarcity and deadlines, or they use this sales script or whatever. And you're only capturing a very small segment of the audience, and we want to change that. Okay, so yesterday, just to review, we went over kind of the underpinnings of stealth influence. Go back and watch that if you haven't. Today, we're going to talk about the thing that nobody is practicing and getting good at and mastering, and that is understanding core beliefs. Okay, core beliefs. Now, when we talk about core beliefs, we have to understand that everybody comes from a different place. Again, we hit on this on the previous video. Everybody has a different belief system. And if we don't understand their belief system, we're going to be dead in the water. We are not going to be able to help them. We're not going to be able to sell them stuff. We're not going to be able to plant our ideas, which should be beneficial to them. If they're not, then I hope you don't plant ideas. But assuming we have beneficial ideas, we have to get them planted, and we have to understand their core beliefs. Okay, I'm going to walk you through how to do this just one time so that all of your content becomes a force multiplier. It meets people where they're at, and it moves them where you want them to go. Okay, core beliefs. Now, what you're going to get if you are, you can get a pen and paper, you can record this or whatever. If you are a member of your Customers for Life bundle member, you'll get these recordings, you'll get all these worksheets, private clients. Obviously, if you are in any higher end membership of ours, you're going to get these worksheets. My private clients already have them, right? So this is how we bust through core beliefs. You're going to see the spreadsheet from yesterday. Again, you have your own copy if you are a private client, and you'll get a copy at the end of next week if you're a bundle, if you bought a bundle. So we talked about the adoption decisions. We'll address that later. This is where we want to play. So there's a tab called the Belief Buster, and this is a systematic way that we need to start thinking about how we talk to people. Okay, the first step is, what do we need them to believe so that they will buy our thing? What do we need them to believe? Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels, wants you to believe that you're one funnel away. And the way to build that funnel is on ClickFunnels. If you believe that, they could sell you ClickFunnels, right? So that is the belief that we need them to have. For this mini class, which I did not do any marketing for, but had I, the thing I would need you to believe is that your content, no matter how much content you make or how you distribute it, it is not going to work unless you understand what I'm teaching here, unless you understand how to meet people where they're at and move them. Okay, so at the very top here, you can do this on a legal pad or pen and paper or in a Google Doc. Say, what do we need them to believe? If you don't know the answer to this question, all of your marketing, all of your content is you're shooting in the dark. Okay. It's surprising how many people don't know this. So what do we need them to believe so that they will buy our thing? That's step one. So sit on that. Okay. Your first action step is going to be understanding, what do we need them to believe so they'll buy your thing? And it has to be different. You can't just say, well, they need to believe that if they do therapy, they'll feel better. That doesn't make them want to buy your thing. It makes them want therapy. So what do they need to believe? They need to believe that focusing on front-end acquisition is actually costing them more money than it's making them. And the only way, or the only system that will work to improve lifetime value, is Customers for Life. So there's a belief that they need, and your thing is a solution. Okay. So fill that out. Now, we're going to work through this. I've done this one time for each of my offers, and it creates just an innate understanding of how to make content, what to say, what stories to tell, and how to tell them. Okay. So we want to list out the false beliefs. What are the false beliefs that your clients have? Think about the sales calls, think about the objections, think about all of these things. Okay. What are the false beliefs? So an example in the high ticket space might be, I can't raise my prices because, and then we have to think, okay, we're going to do some thought experiments here and really think about our people we're talking to. What experience gave them this belief? Well, they had a client, and that client ended up going with a lower priced freelancer. So the assumption here, right, is that I can't raise my prices because I'm already losing clients because of my price. Okay, that's the experience that they have. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about understanding the experience from their point of view. Now, what is the story they tell themselves? Put yourself in their shoes. If I raise my prices, I will lose all my clients and I won't have any work. That's the story they tell themselves. So again, it doesn't matter if it's true or false. This is where they're at. We go back to belief systems. We have to be empathetic for other people's belief systems. And then what you can do is you can bullet out or just make a little note. What is a personal story, a client story, or even a parable? You can pull something from the Bible. Great marketers do that too. That busts this objection. Now, the places we can look are testimonials, client success stories, conversations, in the mirror. You can look and say, I used to think that too. Here's the experience that gave me that belief. Here's a story I used to tell myself. And then here's how I got out of that. And all you have to do is bullet this out, because I'm actually going to show you how to structure these a little bit later on. Okay. Then what's the next false belief? Well, I don't want to just pick a niche, which I actually am a huge fan of not picking a niche. But if you sell niching down, false belief is, well, I can't pick a niche. And the reason is all of my clients have been in different industries so far. So if I pick a niche, I wouldn't have all my clients, right? That's just experience that they've had. And so the story is, if I pick a niche, I'll be limiting my options. I'll be getting a lot less business because I won't have this diversity or this vast pool to pull from. And then you say, well, I thought the same thing. It was only when I picked a niche that I started to grow, for example, right? So that's a personal story. You also want client stories. Again, parables work just fine, but always look in the mirror first, and then look at your testimonials and your client successes, and then look to parables, Bible verses, stories, well-known literature, anybody that has a good story that will bust this belief. Okay, so we need to do this. If it's amazing that most people can't pick 2 or 3 of these, which means, again, all that content you're making is very, very limited. There's just not much going on in your content. If you can't tell me what the false beliefs are, what experience gave them that belief, the story they're telling themselves, okay, that's the most important, honestly. Because if you go back to the previous video yesterday, we just feel misunderstood. So oftentimes when I speak to people, they go, or oftentimes when I post on Facebook, people will reach out and they'll say, how did you know that about me? And I wasn't talking specifically to them, but I've done this work, right? People often say, you can articulate how I feel better than I can articulate it to myself. That is where we need to get. Your content will explode your business in a very good way if you can articulate how they feel better than they can articulate it to themselves. Okay? So this is the, again, what do we need them to believe? Right across the top. What is the false belief? Start with 1. I'm going to tell you how many to do in a minute. Start with 1. What is the number 1 biggest false belief they have? What is the experience that gave them the belief? It's astonishing the number of people that go, I don't know, they're just idiots. Yeah, that's fine. You're going to be poor and angry for the rest of your life if you think that way. Understand empathy. What is the experience? Why do they feel this way? What happened to them? Put yourself in their shoes and say, hey, if this happened to me, what's the story I would tell myself? All of a sudden, like, oh, that makes sense, right? But here's what you're missing. Here's a personal or client story or a parable or a study in a book somewhere, right? That was framed in a story that crushes your false belief. Okay. I'll give you some examples later on. I think day 5, I'll pull this all together and give you some examples. I'm just giving you the pieces because you need to do this work first. Okay. So that's the core belief worksheets. So your action steps, what I want you to do is 8 false beliefs. There's a very specific reason that I'm picking 8, which I will explain later because it's not content related. It's just marketing strategy related. 8 false beliefs. And then the experience that gave them that belief. And then you can just bullet out or the story they tell themselves. What story they tell themselves? How do they come to this belief based on the experience they had? And then bullet out a personal story. You could just write a name. You could just bullet out or leave some notes for yourself about your own story, or you could just drop the name of a parable or a story that you know. Okay, this is just for reference. So that's what I want you to do today. That's the challenge for today. Nothing else will matter if you don't do that. Once you do this, you're going to start cranking content and it's going to hit people so hard and you're just going to know, you're just going to default to this, the cadence I'm going to teach you tomorrow and Tuesday. Right? So what I want you to do next, once you have these 8 false beliefs, take at least one of them and turn it into a Pixar story. If you're not familiar with the Pixar framework, I'll show you real quick. So we're going to pick, I rank order them. So what's the biggest? You can just list them out and then go back and rank order them. The biggest objection, the biggest false belief, and then the experience, the story, and then you have your notes here, right? You have your notes about your personal or client story. If it's a personal story or a client story, or a parable for that matter, but parables are already in this format. If it's a personal story or a client story, use the Pixar formula. I say pitch formula because it's actually really good on sales calls. So let's say you have a client story here or your own story. Go to that testimonial, go to that video and frame it this way. Once upon a time, there was a young kid named Nick who really wanted to own a business. So he invested in high ticket sales program. Every day he did what he was told, but it didn't make sense to him. Then one day he said, you know what? I'm going to try to do this backwards. And because of that, blah, 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 blah. And because of that, you know, now I invert everything and make a lot of money until finally I lived happily ever after. So you want to take your story, and this is way harder, or it takes way more cognitive horsepower than you probably choose to believe. Okay. So we do this work and we have bullets for our story. Then we pull this story and it could say, oh, you know what? Jessica Doe is a great example of this, right? And this is like Nick when he was 19 was a great example of this, and so on and so forth. Then we go, all right, Jessica Doe. Once upon a time, there was a certified nutritionist named Jessica Doe, and every day, you know, she was posting on Facebook, hustling, trying to make ends meet. And then one day she went to the dog park and met me there. And I told her about this particular method and to do this. Because of that, she started thinking differently about how to grow her business. And because of that, so she was able to acquire clients on autopilot. And because of that, she actually works. She cut the amount of work she was doing in half, and then she cut it in half again until finally she was able to put the whole thing on autopilot and live happily ever after. right? Every one of our testimonials eventually, and I'll give this action step, should be put into a Pixar formula. And I'll tell you how to do that, why to do that, and who should do that. Okay. The source is the testimonials in the mirror, and whoever's doing your sales should absolutely have the responsibility of writing these. So when somebody goes, oh, well, I have 3 kids. Will this work for me? Well, let me tell you about Jessica Doe. Okay. She was a nutritionist. She had 3 kids and she was still in school. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So it makes the content and conversations really, really powerful. So use the Pixar framework. Make this personal or client story the star of your Pixar story. Okay. So you should write these out. All I would do is start with the very top one, which should be ranked in order of magnitude. So if we can bust this belief, then we'll sell more people. Like, this is the biggest false belief people have. And then find one story and run it through this Pixar framework. This is the muscle that we want to flex. We don't have to say once upon a time, and I'll explain that in a minute. Okay. So every single day, your salespeople and your marketing and your fulfillment team should craft one Pixar story. I don't know why it says star story for each objection or each false belief. This is how everybody on your team and every piece of content you make becomes exponentially more powerful. I don't care if it's video or writing or audio. I'll show you my framework for all 3 on day 5. Hey, but none of that matters if you do not have this filled out and have your Pixar stories written. Okay, so every single day from this point forward, you should be crafting a Pixar story, and your first 8 should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? But then what happens once you have this, which is 8 beliefs busted with Pixar stories, and you understand the story, the experience, and all that stuff, once that happens, we can circle back around, start at the top again, and find another personal or client story that addresses this. There's another Pixar story. So we do all 8, and we circle back around. We do all 8 again. And I'm going to show you how to take 8 stories and make like 50 years of content. And it's not just redistributing. It's way more powerful than that. Okay. Now, you are not going to tell these Pixar stories, but you need to know them in this format, right? So you don't actually, I'll never send an email that's like once upon a time, but it's really, really important that in our head, we know this format because it's memorable. That's why Disney and Pixar freaking are taking over the world, because they have this formula for making memorable stories that teach powerful lessons that stick with us forever. And then we want to share it with our kids. Parents share it with parents, kids share it with kids share it with parents share it with kids. It's because it's gone through this process, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And what I'll do, get that done. Show up tomorrow with that done. Or don't watch tomorrow until we get done, because I'm going to show you exactly how to take just a few of these stories. Now, remember, if you write this one, if you just go through this first false belief to completion, give it your best effort, and you write one Pixar story, I will show you how to turn that into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 really, really, really powerful pieces of content that are slightly different. It's not just, download it and put it on Instagram. Okay. It's taking this and running it through the 4 lenses: anthropological, analytical, so on and so forth. There's 4 of them. And then circling back to the adoption decisions and busting through the adoption decisions. Okay. So do this. That's your homework. Tomorrow I will show you what to do with it. Let me check my schedule here. Yep. So tomorrow we're going to talk about what to do with this very first Pixar story that you have. Cool. I told you to be short. I told you to be quick. If you are on the Zoom, if you're on the Zoom and you have any questions, now's the time to ask. And I will let me put this Slide up. Any questions? I'm just walking through this step by step, trying not to overwhelm. Tomorrow, I'll show you while I'm waiting. I will give you give you a glimpse into tomorrow, which will be the next video. Oh, got a question. So false beliefs the same as objections to purchase? No, that's a big mistake. Everybody is so concerned about busting objection. The example being, it's the underlying belief. Sometimes it gives them the objection, right? We want, at least I want, to obliterate the underlying belief, because even if we overcome the objection, but not the belief, they're going to be really bad clients. They're not going to listen, and they're going to have a lot of doubt because we just got them to buy something that's not aligned with their beliefs. Okay, so an example would be, if we have an underlying belief that we shouldn't sleep under willow trees because they're haunted, right? We want in our content, we want people, if assuming that like those trees aren't haunted is something that we want our people to believe, that's one of the things that they need to believe to be a client. We don't just want to overcome their objection. We want to shatter that belief. And that's actually a real example from Diffusion of Innovations. So just be aware that objections, everybody, salespeople in particular, are trained to handle objections, which is fine on a sales call. But in our content, especially, we want to completely break down and rebuild their belief systems. Overcoming objection is one thing, and it's pretty much got to be done one-to-one or one to a few. We want to completely change their belief system, because if we change their belief system, the assumption is, oh, another question here. So for me, the idea that there's nothing that they can do about their arthritic knee because a doctor told them so is a belief. Yes. Yep. It's a belief that they have that they will have to spend the rest of their life with their arthritic knee. And the experience they have is they went to go get solution, and a medical professional said, no, you're just going to have to live with that. So the story they tell themselves is, I have to live with this because a doctor said so. And if there was another way, the doctor would have told me, right? If there was a way to fix this, a doctor would know. So now you have to tell them a story that absolutely in your content, this isn't just sales calls. It does work really well on sales calls, but we got to think about newsletters, content, commercials, videos, right? So now the story you have to tell them is good. You got lots of stories that blow that type of belief up. Perfect. Now you have to tell them a story in a way that addresses those components. You know the story. So a doctor probably told you that. Totally get it. A doctor actually told Sarah that too. But because a doctor is not trained in XYZ, right? They just missed this really critical component. So what I told Sarah to do was ABC. And immediately her knee pain went away, and she went to Disney with her kids without her knees hurting for the entire day. Right? We just completely obliterated this underlying belief that they're walking around with. Right? Now, and I'll teach this tomorrow. Where's my trust profile? There we go. Now, tomorrow, we could take that same exact story about Sarah breaking through that belief, right? And we could say, we just told the aspirational story. She went to Disney without her knees hurting. It was awesome. We could also tell that story in a way that is actionable. So actually your doctor is wrong, and here's proof. Go do XYZ, and I bet you feel a little bit better. Let me know how it goes. That's actionable. Same story, right? Analytical. So you can say, well, Sarah heard that she would never get rid of her arthritis because the doctor said, but here's the data, here's the numbers, Here's the research that actually suggests that's wrong. Right. And then we can say, well, the reason a doctor says that, so now we're talking about anthropological, the reason a doctor says that is they're really just concerned about keeping people from dying or whatever. Like, so they have a tendency to oversimplify or group index, or this is like complicated human behavior and concepts. So you see how in doing this worksheet, and thank you for asking those questions, in doing this worksheet here, the false belief is that an arthritic knee cannot be resolved. Like, I have to live with my pain. Experience is the doctor told me so. The story is, well, if it was possible, obviously my doctor would have known. And so I went in there and they said it wasn't possible. Then you tell a personal story. You just line it out here, put it in Pixar format, right? That's one really powerful piece of content. Now you take that same story and you run it through an actionable lens. Then you take that, so that's two. Same story, run it through an aspirational. Just tell a story about how she was so sad she couldn't take her kids to Disney because it hurt her knees too much to walk around. And now they go every weekend. It's aspirational story. Okay, analytical, break down the research, the data, all that stuff, the numbers, show the number of cases that have been resolved, all this stuff, just numbers, speak with numbers here. So now we have 4 pieces of content. And then talk about the human behavior. Why do we believe our doctor? Why does our doctor say these things? How come we only asked one person and then decided that that was enough? Like, why don't we get another source or a second opinion? That's all anthropological. So now we took this one false belief, one story, and we have 5 incredibly powerful pieces of content that will speak to people that want to take action. It'll speak to people that want to hear stories. It'll speak to analytical people. And it'll speak to people that like to think about human behavior. Okay. And we'll break this trust profile down more tomorrow. So that's it. This is what we're going to jam on tomorrow. That's your homework. So you can see how if you just actually systematically work through this, I will show you how to turn it into a lot of really powerful stuff. You're welcome. Thank you for asking. All right, go take your action steps, and I will see you guys tomorrow.